This is a Jmix exclusive.
So what is the news going on with Suge Knight and David Kenner right now?
Well, TMZ just broke a story that Suge Knight, and it's really unusual for him to be this talkative in a courtroom, was actually begging the judge to allow him to speak to his attorneys directly. It's a very strange situation, the fact that apparently the way that the court has constructed, Judge Ryan of the Superior Court has constructed Suge's communication chain, which has actually kind of been a mystery to all of us because, you know, the family says some stuff and then his alleged attorneys say some stuff. And so there seems to be all this Suge said this, Suge said that. But what we're getting now from the judge in this case and the video that was on TMZ is that Suge really only has one attorney that he communicates through, and he is actually not allowed to talk to any of his other attorneys. And I'm guessing that that would, by inference, include Thaddeus Culpepper, who's made a lot of allegations to people that he's been talking to Suge, and Suge said this and Suge said that. So it's very interesting to hear because out of Suge's own mouth in front of the judge, he is claiming that he is not allowed to speak to his other attorneys, and Westerfield or West something or other, I couldn't get the name right on it, maybe you could find out, is the only attorney that he is allowed to talk to. Thaddeus Culpepper's name was not mentioned in there. But what's interesting to us is that out of the blue, Knight begins to talk about how he has been desperately trying to get to David Kenner. And we all know who David Kenner is. And David Kenner was in the courtroom at the time with Suge Knight, with the judge, where Suge Knight was asking the judge's permission to have more than one attorney, which the judge said he could have as many as he wanted, but that at this time that Suge has been pretty much barred from talking to any of his other attorneys. And this is coming from Suge Knight's own mouth. So it really does put into question a lot of stuff, and that's kind of what we know right now.
My contacts with his fiancée, Toylin Kelly, she also said as far away as 2 months ago that they were barring him from using his own investigators on his case. So this is, I mean, it is news, but this is nothing new. Coming from the court to Suge, this is just another one move in a long line of blocking him from proper legal defense. Do you feel that there's going to be some kind of conflict of interest here that maybe Mr. Wright is trying to retain Mr. Kenner?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that, well, there's a couple of things that are coming out of this that make this of interest to fans. We've been asked time and time again, you know, we've had people come on videos and say that this says Wright's problems have absolutely nothing to do with the Tupac Shakur case, that they have nothing to do with it at all, and that, you know, this is just some sort of random isolated event. Well, I think that you can read the tea leaves here and understand what's happening. Suge Knight has said in the video, and it's very clear in the video, that he's desperately trying to reach out to David Kenner, and of course David Kenner is making an appearance. The judge did not allow that. Suge is allowed to talk to one attorney and one attorney only. So it makes it very interesting because if that is the truth, then it does beg the question of how Thaddeus Culpepper is receiving his information that he claims to have talked with Suge, and he's getting his information from Suge, things that he's told us, things he's told other news outlets that he's made claims to. So that puts the first thing into question. I think the second thing that puts into question is whether or not this has anything to do with the Tupac case. And, of course, with Mr. Wright being out on $50,000 bail and his getting Suge Knight's old attorney, Robin Yanes, to represent him in his federal indictments, I think that there is going to be a definite circling of the wagons or an interest in circling the wagons, and I personally believe that that's why there is a move, and it could be the move that Suge Knight is trying to get a hold of David Kenner because he wants to fully understand what's happening with Reggie Wright and what's happening with that. Clearly, both men know where certain bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, probably literally speaking as well. And I think that the significance of this outreach to David Kenner, because you got to remember, Suge Knight fired David Kenner in the early part of this whole court case. He said he didn't want David Kenner representing him, and it was right after David Kenner walked out of the courtroom that the judge threw down the hammer and said that Suge Knight wasn't allowed to talk to anybody. So, there's been some conjecture that David Kenner may have had some influence in that judge's decision. We'll never know that for sure, but I think that it's clear Suge Knight did fire David Kenner. And once he fired Kenner, there was, clearly no reason for them to be talking. Now, suddenly, at this time, a week after Reggie Wright is busted, Suge Knight's been desperately trying to reach out to David Kenner. David Kenner clearly wants to talk to Suge Knight, but they're being barred from the court to have that communication. And clearly Knight's attorney that is representing him right now, this Westerfield or West or whatever his name is actually not facilitating that communication, because there would be no reason for Suge to have to speak directly to Kenner if he was using that attorney to talk to Kenner and the lines of communication were clear. So reading the tea leaves again, Jesse, I think that the big thing here is that Knight wants to talk to David Kenner, and it is clearly not something he wants the other attorney to know anything about. He wants to talk to him directly, and, one could very easily conjecture on what that might be. The information they have regarding the murder of Tupac Shakur, either one or both of them is a very, very big card that they could play, or the murder of Christopher Wallace. They're very big cards that the two of them could play against each other or provide information. I'm not saying that's what Suge Knight wants to talk to David Kenner about, but clearly whatever Suge wants to talk to David Kenner about is off the menu. It's maybe in regards to his case, but it may also be in regards to something he doesn't want to run through the regular lawyer chain of communication, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like after all these years and all the man-hours of investigation that you've done, that this is starting to take a turn in the public eye that could be very revealing for everyone involved?
Yeah, I do, actually, because I think that anybody who keeps up with this case understands the dynamic between Suge Knight and Reggie Wright and this love-hate relationship between the two of them. Like I said, I think that it's a big thing that I call it getting the band back together again, that Suge Knight is reaching out to David Kenner, that he has publicly shown contempt for and fired from being his counsel in the court case. So in this very case. So for whatever reason, Suge is trying to reach out to David Kenner. He's not being allowed to. I think that that's very wise on the part of the court. I think that there's a reason the court is not allowing him to, and I think the court knows the reason that they're not allowing him to. So I think that this is definitely a turn in the right direction. I think it's all of the elements are, the wind is blowing in the right direction, if you want to say that. I think that the moves that are being made by the people and the posturing of Suge Knight with David Kenner and the current problems with Reggie Wright definitely are a good sign of maybe some progress moving forward. The conflict of interest that I see is, speaking to that, is Reggie Wright's representation by an attorney by the name of Robin Yanes, who represented Suge Knight, many years ago. Generally speaking, attorneys don't represent parties that have some sort of a previous relationship with one of their clients, because the interests of Suge Knight and the interests of Reggie Wright could conflict at one point, and that would be what we call a conflict of interest. So I find it puzzling that Robin Yanes made an appearance. She may not continue, or he may not continue, I don't know if it's a he or she, may not continue to represent Suge at this point, but represent Reggie Wright at this point. But it's clearly the Robin Yanes' appearance on the calendar for the representation of Reggie Wright, having been Suge Knight's former attorney, maybe even at a time when the two of them were actually partners, that does present a classic conflict of interest that is surprising to me that no one has called out at this point in the ballgame. So that might be also something Suge Knight's trying to reach out to Kenner about, is whether or not Reggie Wright should be using one of his old attorneys to represent him. And, of course, like I said, you've got certainly a conflict of interest between the interest of Suge Knight and the interest of Reggie Wright.
This is a Jmix exclusive.
What up, shut up?